Anybody you want to ask Mr. Townsend some questions?
Where are you from? What part?
I live in Orange County. I've lived there for 20 years. I lived upstate when I was in graduate school, and lived in the city when I started my business. Yes, sir.
If you were elected as a senator, would you support a bill to basically abolish the Department of Energy?
They do provide some legitimate functions. I heard a college professor once say that the Department of Energy made as much sense as having a Department of Typewriters because it concerns every aspect of the federal government. Now, you have certain legitimate functions in the Energy Department. Somebody has to do it. I think we ought to have more nuclear power plants in the United States, but I want somebody making sure that they comply with the law. This massive problem we now have in the Gulf, I'm not one of those to say shut them all down. In fact, I think just the opposite. But we have to drill for oil somewhere on land and offshore, and we had an accident. I don't think that we need to shut them all down because we had a tragic accident. We have to keep exploring. That is who we are. As long as we find the legitimate functions that are done by the Department of Energy are handled by an agency, because some of this does require regulation. I wish that government agency that was supposed to enforce the rules on British Petroleum had done it. But once you have those legitimate functions covered, let it go. I think we need fewer bureaucrats and fewer bureaucracies in Washington.
Mr. Townsend over there, Diane. Diane, yes.
Hi. How do you feel about the green movement and the legitimacy of the green movement?
I don't. As a society, I hope to see the day when we use fewer fossil fuels because it would be great if we did. I would love for some scientists to come grow some strand of wheat that would fuel our cars. I think that would be great. I would like somebody to invent a way to get fuel for motor vehicles out of water and out of the air. We're not there yet. And for someone to come in now and say, hey, we're all going to be green in 5 years, if they get their way, we're not going to have any economy left. It won't happen. So, yes, fewer fossil fuels in time, but we cannot do that overnight. Yes, sir.
Would you be willing to mandate constitutional justification for any bill passed by Congress?
Explain what you're meaning. What you're talking about.
Just for Congress to stick to its enumerated powers listed in the Constitution. Would you be willing to work for or pass a bill that restricts Congress to those enumerated powers?
That sounds like a good idea. I'd like to know more about the specifics of this. But, yeah.
Well, for instance, the Constitution gives no authority to Congress to have a Department of Education. Would you be willing to abolish the Department of Education?
You didn't think this was going to be a cakewalk?
No, I don't. That's a good question. Where I have problems with the way things are done is they string states along, and it's just like some of the incentives they give to a state to participate in something, and then you turn around and say the first year we'll fund 90% of it, the second year 50%, the third year 30%, and the state gets used to these programs, and then the federal government yanks the money. You want to know why your property taxes are where they are. It's because these things end up being unfunded state and federal mandates. To the extent that the Department of Education does anything useful or worthwhile, I want to see someone.
Can you name me anything useful or worthwhile they don't?
They sure do muck up the system. Now here's a good example. We have all of these tests floating around. What did the states do when the federal government started insisting on testing students? They dumbed them all down, so they're meaningless. And it's a good example of the silliness that sometimes goes on in Washington. Offhand, I am not sure I know what I would consider a wholly legitimate function of the Department of Education. If somebody would show me one, I would like to see it. Yeah. I also, let me give you, David, can you make sure this gentleman has a copy of my website and biography? So I would like to, for you to send me more about this constitutional provision you were talking about.
Mr. Townsend?
Yes, sir.
Excuse me, you mentioned that you grew up on a farm, and New York is a big state. What about the farmer? You know, we go food shopping in stores. All our meat, if people read the back of it, comes from Mexico and Canada. What happened to the farmer in this country?
Well, I was raised actually in the Midwest, and I got to tell you, I hope you eat some of my father's pork.
So when are we going to get it? Obviously, if you turn over your meat, it says on the back of the label, Mexico and Canada.
Well, that's one useful thing about those labels is you can look over there and see where you're getting it from. I try and buy meat that is grown in the United States because I have a little bit more faith about what is put into animals in the United States than I do a foreign country. I must tell you, I don't, when I'm in a store, I don't buy grapes that are grown across the border. Or if I do, I make sure they're thoroughly washed because we have different standards in this country than they do overseas.
But how do we change this?
Well, look, there are far fewer farms today than there were when I was a kid. This is an ongoing problem in New York. I'm going to tell you, traveling in upstate New York can break your heart. You see buildings that are no longer in use. You see what used to be thriving herds and they're not there anymore. You go through small towns upstate. In some places, every other storefront is closed. In the farm country, the farmers are the backbone of the economy. I wish there was a simpler way to say we could keep more of them in business.
You could get their support.
Well, I'll be asking for it, and I think sometimes they just want someone who will listen. But it's an ongoing problem, and it's not a problem that is easily fixed, unfortunately.
Thank you.